I have so many questions. Why didn't they just make the rear diff the same width? No suspension seats. Oh, aircon, wow. I'm 6'8". You'd expect this to be very roomy. Not. That's probably the coolest thing about this car, just the sound.
G'day guys, welcome to episode 2 of our LandCruiser 76 series build. Mitch and I have been driving this thing around for the last couple of weeks in its current form, and we're here to answer that age-old question, is a 70 series worth it?
No, but thanks for watching.
No, stick around. We're gonna talk about this.
No, all jokes aside, guys, Cahn is a bit of a Toyota lover, so I already know his answer to these questions, but I'm a little bit on the fence. I don't really care if it's Nissan or Toyota, but that's why Cahn's here to convince me. Rightio, so let's first talk engine. So obviously it's a 4.5 litre V8 turbo diesel, pushes 430 Newton meters. Now, compare that to a 2.4 litre 4-cylinder Triton, and you get the exact same figure, 430 Newton meters.
I mean, everyone knows that the 70 series is pretty underpowered, but there is a lot of room for improvement. So there's a lot of aftermarket we can potentially do to this to make it slightly faster. So this is a pretty interesting engine. In the past, the heavy-duty Land Cruisers would typically share engines with Toyota trucks and buses. Right. So you're thinking like the B series, the 1HZ, the 1HD FTE.
And the Coaster and
Coaster
stuff.
buses, yep. Dyna trucks, all that sort of thing. This engine, the 1VD, is only in the 70 series Land Cruiser and the 200 series Land Cruiser in a couple of global markets.
Right.
So I don't think Toyota put a whole lot of effort or engineering into making this a powerhouse, because it's designed for a set purpose, which is just high kilometers, reliability, long life, low strung. It's going to be sitting there. Lots of farm work. It's going to be sitting there idling, right, maybe towing heavy loads and that sort of thing. So it's just going to do everything with ease. I think we should be super stoked in Australia, South Africa, and I think the Middle East have these as well, that we even got this. Because considering Toyota doesn't use it in any other model, it's pretty special.
Yeah, very interesting points. But we will take it for a drive shortly, but before we do, where we are right now, we're out the Blue Mountains way. I've towed the MT1 all the way out here with this thing. In my opinion, I've done a lot of towing with the Ranger and our D-Max, and if I'm being completely honest, I think they tow better than this thing, especially the D-Max, which you can't really compare the Ranger because that's built for it, but the D-Max, a lot smaller engine, maybe a little bit more Newton meters, but at the end of the day, I really expected more from this to be able to tow a lot better. And the MT1 doesn't weigh much. Right now, it's probably only weighs about 1,100 kilos. The
one thing I remember you saying on the way out here was that it was a bit all over the road. And one thing I think a lot of people don't expect is the aerodynamics and how much they play a factor in a vehicle like this, towing a trailer. There's a lot of surface area on both sides and the front that's going to cop wind resistance and any cross breezes, and you really notice it.
Yep.
Driving older 70 series Land Cruisers, I noticed that a lot as well. So I reckon people are expecting it to perform like a sleek, modern dual cab. Well, sleek compared to this. But then when you come across a crosswind or something, it actually throws you around a little bit more. Which is
exactly what was happening.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily that it tows that poorly. It's possibly that it's a box on wheels.
Now, we're not going to talk too much about suspension and wheels or tyres with this particular vehicle anyway, because when we bought it already had 33s and a bit of a lift, so that's another conversation. But let's talk a little bit more about how Toyota have set the car up from factory. And what I mean by that is the front diff being wider, obviously to fit the V8 in.
Yes.
But the rear diff is considerably narrower. But why didn't they just make the rear diff the same width?
Right, so the 70 series was first released in 1984. And basically nothing has changed from about the A-pillar back since 1984. So overseas markets did receive the 76 series and the 77 series earlier than we did in Australia. Obviously we only got it in 2007, but you might see some shorties or middies floating around that have pretty similar body panels. They always use the same rear axle width, with a little bit of variation when they switched from drum brakes to disc brakes. So I assume Toyota didn't see a need to upgrade it. They knew it worked, and they saved a whole lot of engineering costs by being able to use everything from the A-pillar back. Now, a lot of people probably assume that Toyota were just lazy, but I'd imagine they would have done a whole lot of testing, and there's probably some prototypes out there with widened rear axles. Do you really think you can tell the difference? Or is it just because you know about it, you're imagining it?
I really don't know, to be completely honest. We took it out to do the first video, the reveal of this, and to get to where we were going was a little bit, how you going? And I think I could notice it just because I put my front left wheel up onto a rock step and I expected the rear wheel to follow suit, which it didn't. It ended up slipping into a rut, which wasn't a big deal because twin locked, pretty cool. Got out of it straight away. So I think the big difference would be just on sand, but even then I haven't driven it on sands, so I can't really comment, but we'll have a go in a couple of weeks, take it up to Newcastle or something like that.
It'd be really interesting if we could track someone down, so maybe throw a comment below if you've got a relatively stock 70 series, but you have widened the rear track. Because we could go out and do a video comparison and actually see what the difference is.
That'd be awesome. Now the controversy will continue once we move on from this subject and move into the interior of the car, but before we move on, I want to talk fuel economy real quick. Have a guess at what this does empty on the highway with nothing on, no trailer, nothing in the back.
Well, the literature would suggest it's around 11 to 12 litres per 100, right?
Well, it's not too far off. The best I've gotten so far is about 12.9.
Okay.
And really doesn't change too much depending on how you drive it. It's all within 12.9 or 13.4. That's the worst I've got. And 13.4 was more off-road, like out in the bush. So.
And we are running slightly bigger tyres. It is lifted. We've got the bull bar, so slightly more air going underneath it, a bit more wind resistance.
I'm actually blown away by that because it's a relatively heavy car. We also got a weighbridge ticket the other day. It's just over 2.4, almost 2.5 tons rather.
Right.
And it's a big V8. You'd expect it to be thirsty, but to be honest, I'm a fan of the fuel economy.
And that leads me to probably the last thing we'll talk about before we head inside. This is a 2014 model. You'd probably have noticed by the fact we don't have the giant bonnet on this one. So we missed out on the updated injectors. We missed out on the bonnet, obviously. But we also missed out on the lower second and fifth gear, I think it is.
Yep.
I mentioned before that LandCruisers have used the same body since about 1984. They've pretty much used the same gearbox since about 1990. The H150, H151 series.
In the 80 series and whatnot.
Exactly, 80 series, 100 series. The updated model has a H152F. The 2 just means it's a different ratio gearbox, so you get a lower fifth gear, bit better on the highway. That's something we might look at doing in the future as well. So let us know in the comments below if you think that's worth it.
Okay, so let's continue this controversy on the inside of the car because I have so many questions about why this thing is set up the way it is.
Why it's so good.
Not quite.
Why it's better than your 1988 Pajero.
It's definitely not. My car is 10 times better than this, but
look at this.
No suspension seats. Oh, aircon, wow. Electric windows. Oh,
you don't have them.
Yeah, I do. You broke it, that's why I don't have, the driver's window doesn't go down because of you. Okay, so get in there. Tell us everything that you like about this groundbreaking interior and I'll tell you everything I hate about it.
So to start with, I think I prefer the pre-2009 tin dash. We've both had 1980s four-wheel drives.
Still do.
And it's kind of difficult for me to pick out a lot of things I do like about this one, considering I've had a mid-wheelbase from the mid-80s with more gear in it.
Yeah, it's crazy to think.
Suspension seats were in the mid-wheelbase, you've got them in the Paj. That said though, the updated dash, you have airbags, which is nice. A little bit safer, I suppose, for you and your passenger.
Yep.
Groundbreaking. You no longer have the handle.
Exciting.
You no longer have the handle, but you do have a clock.
Oh, 2014 model comes with a clock.
We do have the GXL, so we got the clock.
But this is kind of my point. We're talking about a 2014 model car, and the most exciting thing that you can come up with for the interior is a clock. It's just...
There's a cup holder now.
It does my head in. Oh, a cup holder.
So
and
that's the
look at this.
That's the updated interior as well.
A phone holder. This is an average iPhone. Oh. Good luck finding a phone that fits in there. And I think, jump out for a second. Right. I want to show you something. I'm 6'8". You'd expect this to be very roomy. Not. Look at it. Fifth gear. If I try and relax, I can't. Still a pain in the neck where that, or pain in the knee really, where that is. And if you stand by for a second. Ow!
Yeah.
I know I'm being a sook, but really? Like...
Yeah, ergonomics aren't its strong suit.
80 grand or more for a brand new one. Speaking of interior, you can see the dash here. It's obviously the updated dash, 130 litre fuel tank, pretty cool, and front and rear locked. from factory.
Yeah.
That's something you don't see very often, so I will give it that. That's pretty cool.
And it's hard wearing. At the end of the day, the fact
Yeah.
that it's got diff locks, a big fuel tank, and a fairly hard wearing interior that's pretty basic is a good thing if you're gonna head off-road often.
Yeah. And as I said, I'm being a big sook, but it's a 2014 model, so you would expect, for the price you pay for a car like this, you would expect a lot more for it. Rightio, enough talking. Get in, let's take it for a quick spin.
Righto, jump out.
You wish. I'm
You
built
jump-
for this
oh.
car, didn't I tell you? 6'8". I just gotta... Got him. It never gets old. Did you have the keys?
No,
Well, maybe I do.
I threw them on the ground.
You threw them off the cliff?
So on paper, we've discussed some of the technical features, but how does it actually drive, Mitch?
I'm in two minds about this because one, it's a lifted solid axle four-wheel drive. It's quite heavy, so you'd expect it to drive the way it does. But being a later model car, being at the price point that it's at, you would expect better from it. And again, it's modified suspension and modified tires, as we spoke about earlier, but it's a bit all over the road, to be completely honest. It doesn't track very well, especially when the trailer's on the back. But in terms of the power, like we were talking about before, 430 Newton meters, it feels like it's a lot more compared to the Triton that I compared it to earlier. Even though they're both the same on paper, this definitely pulls a lot better than a Triton.
Think about the Triton, it's a 4-cylinder 2.4 litre. If you had two of those in a bank or two banks,
Yeah.
you've almost got the capacity of this engine.
Exactly.
Right? So
Yep.
this thing's gonna be able to output double what the Triton does realistically, if you wanted to. But why would you when it drives as well as it does realistically?
Yeah, but that's probably the coolest thing about this car.
Just the sound.
The sound.
What I was thinking before is, when I was mentioning these, you know, it's a 1980s design essentially, what would you pay right now for an absolutely mint HJ61?
Oh.
Mint. Like a brand new condition.
A lot.
50 grand, 60 grand, like that's what
at
people
least.
are wanting
Yeah,
for
that's
them.
what they're fetching these days. Whether they're worth that or not is a different conversation.
So when I see a 70 series, a 76 wagon for example, I feel like people are paying for the privilege of buying a brand new LandCruiser from the 80s.
Yeah, true.
That's kind of how I see it.
Yep, that's a good point.
So you're paying for, you know, this is the styling you want. It's got the rugged features that you want. It's got the V8, it's got the manual transmission. Oh, the other thing is LandCruisers and Prados are still made in Japan. So as opposed to a lot of manufacturers that are moving production to Thailand. So that probably accounts for some of that extra cost as well.
Yeah, I kind of get that point, but at the same time, I don't understand where the cost is involved in making a car like this. As you said earlier, from the A-pillar back, this is the same car from the 80s. So developing a car, I know the engine, obviously it's new, so that would cost a fair bit to develop, but it's on the production line. Really, did it cost Toyota that much? Did they have to make their money back on such a high price point?
Yeah, it's a fair point.
The other thing you got to keep in mind with a car like this is obviously you're going to modify it. First thing I would be doing with this car is getting rid of these seats because they are not comfortable at all. That's a big issue that I have with a car like this, is you're paying such a high price for it, but then you have to rip the front seats out because they're not comfortable.
And it's funny too, I think you and I have both owned a lot of older four-wheel drives. I don't think they're particularly bad. I mean, they're not as comfortable as a luxury car or something.
That's right. Are you going to be all right to do a heel start?
Yeah, my Datsun doesn't have hill start assist, nor does it have a very good clutch. Neither does your Pajero. You really need to fix that.
No, the Pajero's clutch is fine.
It doesn't exist.
All about the
It's got about an inch of travel. Hoorah! Now, so you guys have a bit of understanding, a normal size human.
Well, there's actually not, it's not bad in the passenger seat here. It's not terrible. Is this your first time driving?
First time driving this, actually, yeah.
Fair enough.
I'm just interested here, not that we need to, but I want to go into low range.
Yeah, first gear is not too bad in it. First gear low
Level
range is okay. It's nothing, it's obviously not like a crawler gear, but...
Did you say a second ago it's cool that this has manual locking hubs?
Yes.
So we can go low range two-wheel drive.
I love that.
Very handy for
That is
towing.
awesome. What a spot this is.
Yeah, it's spectacular. Speaking about the wheel track, I'm not really feeling it on this sort of terrain. I don't think you notice in 90% of driving. On the beach maybe. For someone who's only ever driven older four-wheel drives, aside from for my job, I think it's pretty comfortable. But I understand, I think living with it, you'd probably miss some of those creature comforts if you were used to them. Obviously if you were used to them, and after a while you'd probably wish you had them.
Yeah.
So, Mitcho, after all that, the age-old question, do you think a 70 Series is worth it?
I'm still on the fence. Got to be completely honest. The thing I cannot get past still, no matter what, it's a cool car, I admit that, but the price still can't get past. But we've got a long way to go with this thing, so the first thing I'm going to get stuck into when we get back to the shed is an awesome rear storage setup. It's going to be custom, on a budget, so very affordable and easy to do. You can pretty much do what I'm going to do with your own tools in your own shed.
So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you're ready for Mitch's next episode. And if you haven't seen it yet, check out episode 1 where Mitch takes this thing off-road for the first time. Plus, make sure you leave us a comment telling us your thoughts on the LandCruiser 70 Series or what you would choose instead. Speaking of gearboxes, we could put the 6-speed in from a 200. Or that's super expensive.
Yeah, we don't have that kind of budget, mate.
80s and 100 series had like four-speed autos. We could probably make a bell housing. We could get a 2-speed Toyo Glide from a 1960s Corolla. We could put a Subaru CVT. We could front-wheel drive swap it. We'll put a Honda engine in.